Welcome to Ecosystem North. I'm Jamie Sunsbach. Each week, Ecosystem North shines a spotlight on the people and organizations that support our region's entrepreneurs, uncovering the real story of what inspires and drives them to be entrepreneurial champions. I ask a lot of entrepreneurs, how I can help in the course of my work. That's pretty much what I do. And undoubtedly, at some point, the word capital will suddenly come into the equation. In fact, that comes up a lot, especially in the high growth world where there's typically a longer runway to profitability. That's why I'm so excited to introduce our next guest. I've been privileged to know him for many years now, and excited to have him on Ecosystem North. So please welcome Patrick Donohue, CEO of Hill Capital Corporation.
Jamie, it's great to be here. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I was trying to think, I think we first met when you came down to Rochester many, many years ago. And I remember sitting down with you at Cafe Steam. I think it had just maybe opened or something like that. And trying to help, orient you into the lay of the land of Rochester, which can sometimes be a very interesting place to navigate. But
well, what was interesting for me is I've been to Rochester many times on, business meetings or, meeting with Mayo Ventures or something like that. But this was my first time of being into what I would call really the heart of the entrepreneurial ecosystem of Rochester and the surrounding area. And it was a really cool experience. And we came back several times and we look to get there as much as we can.
Yeah, and it's grown a lot since then, of course, too. So it is nice, and we try to remind people of that. Basically, everything we do through Collider, that we have this amazing space and place in Mayo Clinic that's a hub of innovation, but there's a lot of other great things going on in the Rochester area. So definitely don't want to make this a commercial for Collider, but we do always want to mention that when we have the opportunity. So to get started and really to refocus on you and a little bit on your journey, could you give us just a little bit of your background? Where did you grow up?
Sure.
What first brought you to the region if you aren't from here? And what was really the spark that got you involved in supporting entrepreneurs through Hill Capital?
This will be fun because I'm going to share some context and insights. My whole bio is out on LinkedIn, so if somebody wants to link in, I'm an open networker, so you can check that out. But some of the glue, as it's the parallel to entrepreneurship, is pretty strong. I grew up in Forest Lake, Minnesota. When I was born, we lived in Forest Lake, and my grandparents had owned the theater in Forest Lake and then built the drive-in in the neighboring town of Wyoming, Minnesota. And so I grew up around that. And you know what's funny, Jamie? Until I really did a deep dive into entrepreneurship around the time I had turned 30, I hadn't really appreciated fully those roots. I had been very entrepreneurial in my call it my career endeavors, but I never really thought of it too much until the last 10 to 15 years, when I started to look back and realized how entrepreneurial my grandparents were, especially on my mom's side, but even my father and my uncles, who, they were attorneys and insurance agents, but looking back at it, they were all sole practitioners. They had to take a risk, open up their own practice, hang a shingle out and go for it. And so it wasn't until a long time I really appreciated that. I didn't really grow up around people that had traditional corporate jobs. And so I kind of figured out why I probably have that entrepreneurial itch much more baked into my DNA than I ever fully appreciated.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people, actually, when I talk to entrepreneurs, I usually ask a little bit about their background. And it's amazing how many of those people grew up sort of like you're saying, outside of the corporate world with parents who maybe owned a coffee shop or a restaurant or something like that. And it's amazing how generational entrepreneurship can be. At the same time, something that we're trying to clarify a little more here in Rochester is, there's this big kind of fancy term, right? Entrepreneur. And everybody thinks it's Facebook and these high growth, crazy things, which is totally true. But I always consider, the person down the street starting a bike shop is definitely an entrepreneur. They're taking a risk. They're putting something into the world. And, that's not an easy thing to do, as we both know. So
without a doubt,
trying to broaden that definition. I think it was broad and then it got narrowed. And then we're trying to bring that back a little bit.
Yeah, I
and
think
talk
it's an
about.
interesting conversation because, it really dawned on me again until a few years ago. But when I was growing up, I don't even really recall using the term entrepreneur. Um, it may be somebody that's truly starting something, but everybody who was really entrepreneurs were really just like business owners. They were like the small business owner. And but entrepreneurship, I mean, if somebody's taking a risk to start something, get it going, maintaining it, I mean, to me that is entrepreneurship. So it is an interesting conversation and point.
There, my father always referred to himself as self-employed. I guess I
Right.
don't know if that was like a government designation for tax reasons back in the 80s or what it was, but and I remember him saying self-employed, and at the time I was 6 and I didn't realize the difference between self-employment and unemployed. So when my teacher asked, "What does your father do?" I said, "He's unemployed." And apparently that came back in my parent teacher conferences as a concern.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny how that goes. Um,
Well,
so
entrepreneurship sounds better than self-employed too.
oh
So
yeah, it's a fancy French word that no one can spell.
right. Yeah.
Um,
There you go.
so what was that spark? What got you motivated to do the work you're doing now with Hill Capital?
Oh, I love this question. It's very simple and straightforward. So my whole background has been finance. When I was 10 years old, I started buying some of my first stocks, 10 shares of Coca-Cola and so on and so forth. And so I always knew that I wanted to be in finance, and that's what I did right out of college. But it was eye-opening, Jamie, because you come out of schooling and you go into the business world, and it just was extremely naive. You think, oh my gosh, the United States has been around for quite a long time, and businesses are very established, and the stock market is very established. It's got to be this well-oiled machine. And as the years went by, I realized how dysfunctional it was and how disconnected it was from Main Street. And that just always just ground on me. And a lot of entrepreneurs find this hard to believe, but I've literally seen small businesses in the terms of like the SBA and others, but 30 million revenue businesses, which are still small in the grand scheme of businesses, have a hard time accessing capital. And the smaller it be, the closer to startup, the worse it gets. And it just was, frankly, at times mind blowing. And so that was really the spark for me, being in the belly of the beast of, call it, Wall Street, and in doing Wall Street type of deals, and seeing how disconnected it was from the Main Street type of businesses. And that's where I always knew where I wanted my career to progress, was really working with more of the Main Street type of businesses, to help them build and to grow. So that was really the spark for me.
So I know when I first met you, you were, I don't know if I think of this in terms of entrepreneurs doing a road show, right? When you think of
Right.
IPOs and stuff like that, but you were kind of doing a road show through Minnesota when I first met you.
I did.
Um, so could you tell us a little bit about Hill Capital, maybe what your investment thesis is? I mean, I think you hinted at it in the last question, but I'm
Right.
just trying to understand, where does Hill Capital fit within the sort of the
Within the
continuum
eco. Yeah.
of funders.
Yeah. Well, a lot of questions there. So I'll just start with a couple and then rewind back if you want to ping these other questions. If you think about the ecosystem, call this debt, so straight bank debt, and then call this angel investors, which I prefer more to like frame it as private investors, just individuals making investments. So you got this whole continuum here. We're in the middle. When my whole career, I've looked at, why do different structures work the best? And that was really important to us, is to really understand what was important to the business owner, to the entrepreneur, and what could we provide to them that was something better, different, unique than what was available out there. So frankly, we plucked the best of both worlds. People love equity because they love to get the connections, the advice, the insights. You think about like Shark Tank. Why do they go on Shark Tank? It's not so much because of Mark Cuban's money. It's more because of the connections Mark Cuban and everybody else on that show can help them with. But why do they like debt? Well, debt is the most cost-effective capital that somebody is ever going to get. It's very cheap capital in the spectrum and so forth. And so that's what we looked at, was to say, okay, where and how can we structure our investments to invest in, I would call it rational growth businesses, And to be able to make an investment of, call it $500,000 to $1 million is our sweet spot. We can go outside of that, but how can we make an investment there and into a rational growth business? Because there's a couple challenges. On the debt side, it requires a business to either have a lot of assets or a lot of cash flow. And it's within those constraints. And then if you get over to venture capital and to just straight equity type of deals, they need a lot of growth. A venture investor will say they need to get a 10 to 100 times their investment return. So they put $1 in, they need to get 10 to $100 back. Wow, right? Like Cafe Steam, and you think about like all the entrepreneurial businesses in and around our main streets, like maybe it could be the next Starbucks, but the chances are it's going to be, maybe that location or 10 locations. But it's like, why do we have to have this world that's just very bifurcated? Why can't we do things to help more Main Street type of businesses that want to grow from, two retail locations to 5 or 10, and they don't have to grow to 10,000 to be the next Starbucks? And so that's where our minds have gone in developing Hill Capital, is to be very business owner friendly and to really work with them to help them understand how to properly capitalize that growth opportunity.
So I'm a big fan of Jason Fried from 37 Signals, now known as Basecamp. Yeah. And, he's out of Chicago, and he tries to push back a little bit at, take jabs at places like Silicon Valley. And the one thing that always struck me, and it's been something we've tried to bake into our DNA here at Collider, is the fact that what's wrong with having, $1.5 million business every year?
Exactly.
Like
yes.
what's so terrible about that? Sure, you're not a $1 billion company. You can take a coffee shop and, like you said, and have 5 or 6 locations and have maybe 20 employees who are paid a fair wage, and the owners are getting paid not lavishly, but they're getting paid something, and they're making a living, and it's okay. And
yes.
Why should we put a scarlet letter on people like that and say you should be, franchising, you should be have global distribution? People don't want that, and quite frankly,
it ruined a lot of people's lives because they got taught to do it, and it's ruined their lives. I mean, we could name off tons of startups in Minnesota that got on the venture capital hamster wheel, and it's either go big or go home, and go home means you go bankrupt, right? Like you shut down the business. And it's really sad because even in tech and SaaS companies and stuff, there's a lot of nice $5-10 million ideas. There's not really that many $1 billion ideas, and the pure true venture capital firms, that they need the next $1 billion thing. And yes, there's some of those, and yes, we should support them, but for 90+% of the rest of us small business owners, it's not the right fit.
And with my always fake economic development hat on, I mean, when you talk about economic diversity, you talk about, you need, a place like Rochester where you're obviously tied to a large kind of quote unquote corporate entity,
right?
Which fuels our economy. I mean, we just saw going through the whole COVID crisis, what happens when, you go down to maybe 10 to 20% of the revenue you normally bring in, and how that has a devastating effect on your workforce, and through a lot of other things, the economy, the broader economy of the city as well. So,
right.
That's why we need more, I always say, singles and doubles, right? And eventually that adds up to a run, just like a home run does. It's just not as quick. The funny thing is if you actually look at it, those people tend to be at their success level faster than the Facebooks and all of that, which take 10, 20 years to probably get to where they want to be.
Right.
So I think that sweet spot is a great place to help support people financially, because it's often that sort of scalable growth, I think, is beyond the means of most people in a traditional lending situation.
Right.
Unless they have lots of houses and things that the bank would be very interested in if things didn't turn out so well. So I think, it's a great spot to be. The other question I had was, obviously you've got a lot of individuals investing funds into Hill Capital. Who are some, not asking names, right? But what type of person is interested in joining your group and becoming a part of the amazing work that Hill Capital does?
Yeah, that is a great question. So we just published on our website. You can click down and look at our ambassadors, and those are a number of people that are either advisors to us, our portfolio companies, or some of our founding shareholders. So you could kind of click through and kind of see for yourself. If anybody's listening, want to kind of check that out and see who these people are. The overarching theme is that all of them have a sense of responsibility to the ecosystem. At the end of the day, most of them, the vast majority of them, have done very well, where I would say, money is not really a driving concern anymore. They're comfortably retired, or they sold their business, or whatever the case may be, but they want to stay active in the business community. They want to give back. And so there's very much this social element of community is what we talk about. So it's capital and community of participating in that ecosystem. So that is who these people are. A lot of them they've had the breaks themselves throughout their career where, somebody invested in their business, or they got advice or a helping hand along the way. And so they get it and understand. And that's what they want to make sure that ecosystem is there and even better for future generations. And that was really the catalyst for who came together as Hill Capital. And I'm extremely proud of the people that came together as the founding shareholders and the capital behind Hill Capital, because it's really business owners throughout the region who either actively own businesses today or have and are retired again. But we don't have today institutional capital that's very disconnected from the money. I mean, this is money that was people worked hard to earn this. And when we make an investment in a business owner, that's how we think about it. We invest in their business. They know that this money is coming from basically other individuals that want to be there and help and support them. This isn't some grant or anything like that. I mean, our investment needs to go in and create an economic return and help support that economic engine of that business. So that is what it looks like. We've been very, very, very blessed with our investor group and who this is. I couldn't be prouder.
No, that's fantastic. This is a question that it's more a personal curiosity for me, because the whole funding game and stuff like that is something that super interested in. Obviously, if you were to look in my wallet right now, you'd see like a couple flies and about 3 cents. But how do you? I mean, what's the process of getting someone to invest money with Hill Capital? I mean, what are strategies you employ, or just what really puts someone over the top when they're looking at becoming an investor?
Yeah, well, I will say, this is a lesson I've learned for a lot of things. Like I'd help, get nonprofits going. I've been active in nonprofits. I've helped a number of startups raise capital. I've been in raising a fund. And I will say raising a fund was probably the hardest thing. It is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And frankly, I hope I never have to do something so hard again. It took a lot of time, energy, money, on the front end to go, we went out and had a couple hundred meetings, like, what we did in Rochester a few times, and, go out there and to build relationships and so on and so forth. But, I talk about this in some of my work, and by the way, I'm writing a book, and so I address this in the book. But there's two things that move money in this world. One is trust, and the other is emotion. So at the end of the day, it's all about building that trust and then that emotional hook. So for us, the trust is like, okay, you can see my background, see the background of the other founding shareholders, what we've done, the things we've done to ensure that we have a high degree of likelihood that we're going to have a superior risk-adjusted return, and all the things that would make people say, okay, I feel good about, having a partnership with everybody involved here. So there's all those things. And so every business has to build that trust element. And then the piece is the hook. And so that's where we just talked about, like with our ambassadors and our community, there has to be that intrinsic drive for them to say, I want something more than just a return on my dollar. Because if they want a return on their dollar, literally an accredited investor or a wealthy investor, they literally have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of investment opportunities. They can basically invest in any asset all over the world these days in the click of a mouse. They can go and invest with some of the best hedge funds and anywhere else. And so for us, it really needed to be about where and how this money is going to be invested, and that we can compete with other asset classes. That was critical. But there's this element of you can participate and be active and to help these business owners. And there's these other social and community aspects that come along with it. And so that was really key for us to really bring the community together that we do have.
And I think one of the things I've admired so much about you in sort of social media stalking you over the last couple of years is how active you are in the community, the broader community of at least the Twin Cities that I know of. I mean, I remember seeing you take a very active role at 1 Million Cups
Yes.
and doing other
1 Million
things.
Cups.
And that's something that, not a lot of the other groups do. I think there are some, great examples of people who do that all over the state, but
Yeah.
I really admired the work that you were doing kind of on the ground in something that maybe is tangentially related to what you're working on, but it's definitely, I love when I can see people just jumping in, rolling up their sleeves and saying, hey, I'm here to be a part of the community and I'm doing this because I want to give first. And that's what's really impressed me about the work that you've done in the community, for sure.
Yeah, well, no, I greatly appreciate that, because I think a lot of, like, call it people with traditional Wall Street backgrounds would, they look at, and they've commented to me a number of times, they think we're nuts. And that's kind of good, right? Like, if you look back at like companies that have done well and are successful, there's this element of like, I don't get it, you're crazy. But we always knew that like ecosystem and community was extremely important, because we know that business owners, they want and need a support mechanism. And that was always a critical piece to our business plan, is to help build that community to support these business owners in their journey. And it pulls at my own heartstrings too, because I look at the antithesis of that, which a lot of Wall Street is, a lot of private equity and a lot of these online lenders that are basically payday lenders. And they have all these ways to have little hooks that basically crush a company if expectations aren't met. And, again, you kind of made you talked about a little bit about like economic development, like you're not really in economic development. I'm not really in economic development, but we all have an interest in economic development, right? And so I don't want to go off and like I'm an expert on this, but if you look at like the economic in the ecosystem and so forth of our communities, it has largely been devastated by sources of capital, and it's a problem. And so that is where part of me is like this social element to say, we can provide capital and support these business owners, but do so in the right way that is not detrimental, because anybody can sneak in something in a legal term in a legal doc, and all of a sudden things aren't going right, and then take over a company or squash it or whatever the case may be. And I just, that's tragic, and it happens way too much. And so there is this element of community building. And our name comes from James J. Hill, and he had this, when I would read all these books and learn and understand about how he built out the Great Northern Railway and how he went about it, it was very inspiring to what is the core to our work today. He took the time along the way to help build the communities, in the Northwest Territory, to make sure that they were economically sustainable, because that was key, because the railway wasn't going to do well without that. And that's how we viewed our fund. We're not going to do well unless the ecosystem is doing well itself. So
yeah, absolutely. That's now you're playing to my what I call my love language, right? It's like,
right.
It's all about the community.
Yeah. Well, and I got to mention, because you brought up 1 Million Cups, that's why I love 1 Million Cups. What Kauffman Foundation has done there, when I first got exposure to that, I was in love with it. I still am. That's why I helped start 1 Million Cups Eden Prairie. We're just one of a couple hundred communities like Rochester and Winona and Wilmer. And so I just wanted to be part of that. There's no charge for entrepreneurs to come and share their story. It's a safe place. They can come and share their story. So we get a lot of referrals, and I come across a lot of entrepreneurs, and I hate saying no. So at a bare minimum, I can say, please come and present to 1 Million Cups Eden Prairie, and ping my friend Jamie and go present down in Rochester, and so on and so forth. And I just think it's so important because these things come back in spades, has been my experience.
Yep. So true. So over the last 6, 7 months, it's been a crazy time, a lot of things happening in the world. So if you could think back over the last few months, what's been a real bright spot, something that's super positive out of, all the chaos, all the tragedy that's going on? What's that one bright spot that you've seen that's just been, the thing you're like, when all's said and done, there's going to be a lot of change happening, a different world we're going to emerge into, but this was this bright spot that kept me going.
I love the question, because what really stands out to me is entrepreneurs persevering in the face of adversity. And we could talk about that with the social injustices around George Floyd and a lot of other things that have been happening. We could talk about that in the face of the pandemic. Our last Empire Builders was in May. Of course, we couldn't do that in person. It was online. So we had about 250 people. And the topic was how companies are pivoting in doing things. What are their silver lining through the pandemic? And it was just super, super inspiring. Companies that are doing things and thinking about new revenue models, when their businesses were highly impacted by COVID. And so that's very much the silver lining for us, is to really see it's been very affirming why entrepreneurship is so important on so many levels. But when people can adjust and to get through challenging and difficult times, that's what's super inspiring, and that's what our economy needs. That's what our nation, and more importantly, our world needs. And so that definitely is a highlight for me.
Yeah, no, I've heard so many inspiring stories from people, and yeah, I always one of my adages is entrepreneurs find a way, and
Right.
sometimes it's tough, sometimes it's more than tough, but eventually they're going to figure it out. So
Right.
yeah,
And
hats
that's
off to all
where,
these people doing that.
yeah, and that's why we've done a number of events. We've talked to civic organizations, the chambers, Rotary clubs. We've done a number of private events for like Entrepreneurs Organization and Vistage and others, and really kind of talking about how to survive and thrive through chaos. And that's what's so important, because talking about the thriving is the fun part and kind of easy, but it's really those survival tactics and the cash management tactics that's really important. Because when entrepreneurship is tough enough, but when something comes out of left field, we don't want somebody to be completely knocked out and in the gutter. So that's why we've done a lot of things, like the Women's Business Alliance of West Central Minnesota. We did an event with them, but it's more on just like, okay, how do you survive and get through these times, so then you can see it out on the other end? Because I don't want to see somebody just could be completely just taken out of the game and have to go back and get a real job or whatever the case may be. I want them to stay in the game of entrepreneurship.
Yep. So thinking about moving beyond everything that's going on now, and this is the super broad question, but what's a vision for the future of entrepreneurship in your eyes here in, say, Minnesota?
Well, I definitely think it's already global, and it's going to continue to be more global. If you think about somebody starting out, they can get inspired by things happening throughout the world and make connections throughout the world. I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization. I was just on an innovation call this morning, and of the 250 participants, I'm guessing less than 10% were from the U.S. It's India and Kuwait and Africa and Australia. It's just really neat. And I think, now that everybody's becoming more and more comfortable with online meetings and so forth, I think that's just going to get out there to more and all entrepreneurs, just these global connections. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's business model needs to be global by any means, but if somebody like a coffee shop can be inspired by a cool design of a coffee shop in India or a new way to prepare a beverage, I think we're just we're going to see more and more of that. So that's really good. The other big thing, and I'd love to point out here, and I talked about this quite a bit on a chamber call that I did. Actually, it was with Community Venture Network with Justin Erickson, but I was a panelist there, and I talked about how I was seeing and think it's going to really continue around rural communities becoming more robust. And we're already starting to see it. It's people don't need to live in the metro areas like they used to. And the remote work is just going to become more available everywhere. And so I think that, like the main streets of Rochester are already cool, but I think they're just going to become hotter and hotter because people are going to want to get back to, the communities that really share their personal values and not be cooped up in an apartment building in a highly urbanized area. So I definitely see there being much more robust economic activity throughout the regions and just not in the highly urbanized areas.
Yeah, no, that's something my wife and I were talking about earlier. We get our little tax form from our house every so often, once
Sure.
a quarter, whatever. You're like, oh, great, my property taxes are going up again. And then after that, you look at the value of your house, and you're like, yeah, I've met so many people who have moved here from Boston or the Valley, and they think it's the cheapest, best place to live with zero commute. It's like the biggest commute they have is 15 minutes, and you've reached the other end of the city. So I hope we continue to see that influx of people and really, really smart people who want to contribute to the community, for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think lifestyle design is super important. A lot of Tim Ferriss's work is misunderstood in his book, The 4-Hour Work Week. It should be more titled like, business and lifestyle design, but that's what it's all about is, figuring out a lifestyle that works for you. And, that's what we love to see in business owners. And that's why we get behind and support family held businesses, closely held businesses. We don't need the next, we kind of avoid the next $1 billion thing, quite frankly. But, this is the bread and the butter that make up the ecosystem. And so I think that's a very strong trend for that happening.
Yeah. So we're getting to the end of the interview. So now I get to ask my fun questions. Not that
Those
this
weren't
wasn't
fun?
totally fun. Yeah, that was the fun stuff, right? So what is one thing that people may not know about you?
People are most surprised when they learn I'm a ski instructor. I've in the last year or so, I finally put it on LinkedIn, so some people know now. But I've been teaching skiing for about 20 years now, primarily at Buck Hill, and so I love to teach downhill skiing. So that's one thing that most people would probably find surprising about me.
Yeah, it's amazing as I've done this series, just hearing people saying things that just blow me away. And these are people that I've known for so many years, and it's like, I had no clue. I like that you put it on LinkedIn. So now it's like a real thing because it's on.
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
exactly. Yeah. Well, then some people are like, so do you do that full time? No. Like if I can pay for my burgers at the chalet for the season, that's a good year.
Yeah, I got
not for the money.
I got pretty spoiled living in Utah all those years and just never. I don't know. For some reason, I can't mentally go skiing in Minnesota.
Come skiing with me. You know what? I've learned to love a simple green run at Buck Hill as much as a double black diamond, in Park City. It's just being outdoors and outside and just being on the snow can be magical. So I love it.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely think about it for sure.
I'll buy you a ticket. It will make it easier.
Oh, hey, it's a free offer, everyone.
Yeah,
but
I'll get you a ticket. It won't be a problem. You won't have to worry about like blowing $50 for some little bunny hill experience at Buck Hill. How about
remember, wallet with 3 cents in it and supplies. Yeah. So yeah. The other question is, who is doing great work right now to support entrepreneurs in our region, but maybe isn't broadly known? So we're asking you to shine a spotlight on someone who's doing some great work, but maybe no one knows about, or sometimes people do know, but It's always interesting to see the answers for this for sure.
Yeah, what comes to mind, we've had a really strong, besides Rochester and you, but we've had a really strong experience like in West Central Minnesota, the Wilmer, Princeton. Some of the people, they're part of an economic development group that really stand out, and they're kind of the unsung heroes. People like Jordan Zeller and Sandy Voigt. I mean, just people with massively big hearts that are going above and beyond. Sandy's now part of the Entrepreneurs Fund out of Duluth, and she runs the Women's Business Alliance. But not enough people, it feels like, know about their work and all the things that they're doing and all these resources that are there and available. So I guess that's what comes to mind. But the other answer would be just the people who come to things like 1 Million Cups. It doesn't have to be every week, but even, a handful of times throughout a year, but just showing up or participating and being part of that conversation is huge. And those people don't realize how important they are to the whole ecosystem to be there. So,
yeah, that's again, our central thesis at Collider is getting, unfortunately we can't get everybody in a room anymore, but
right.
Just get people in a room from all over, all walks of life, all experience levels, and just see what happens. And that's been our secret sauce now for many, many years. So I think that is so important. So yeah, can't say enough about 1 Million Cups.
Yes.
So as we close, where can people find you?
Sure. Well, our website, hillcapitalcorp.com, our emails are right out there as well. Again, LinkedIn is super easy. I'm on Twitter and all the rest of that stuff as well. But I always encourage people, just reach out directly. I think in entrepreneurship, there suffers a little bit because they've gotten bad advice of, oh, you need a warm introduction or whatever the case may be. It's like, no. I respond to everybody equally. So, reach out if there's anything I can do, help answer. If, I see somebody on LinkedIn and you need to figure out how to make a connection. I'm pretty open and transparent about those things, because the one thing I've come to realize in entrepreneurship is that time is entrepreneurs' most valuable asset. And I think it's too bad when people or organizations kind of give people the runaround. I just try to get back to them, answer it, and they need to talk to Jane Smith. Like, here's Jane Smith's contact. Reach out to her and be in touch. So I try to be as open and transparent and collaborative as I possibly can. So please reach out. Happy to talk. Oh, and by the way, we're doing Empire Builders on September 17th. And since it's not in person, because it's usually just our portfolio companies and, the entrepreneurs that we know and our ambassadors, we've opened it up. So it'll be online, but we're going to have Amanda Brinkman from the show Small Business Revolution. She's going to do a small keynote, and then we're going to do breakout rooms on questions of essence. So 10 people can get quality time to get to know each other. So we'd love to have you participate, Jamie, and anybody that's listening to this. And if you want to send those invites, because since it's online, we can, handle a few hundred people. It's not a problem. We'll make that happen, and it's open and available and free to everybody to participate. So we try to do as much of those things as we can to support the broader ecosystem.
Well, fantastic. So, well, thanks so much, Patrick, for taking the time to share your story and your enthusiasm for everything Minnesota entrepreneurship. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for everything you do, Jamie. I just very grateful for you and Amanda and Ryan and, oh gosh, all the people that I've met throughout the years in Rochester. It takes a tribe. So thanks for all that you guys do.
Thank you.